Okay guys, so this is Posture 101 for lifters and office workers. So let's jump straight into it. This is our presentation today, so quick introduction if you don't know who I am. My name is Yusuf. I am a coach at Propanefitness. I've coached over 1,600 athletes, helping them to look and perform better naked. I also happen to be a doctor in training, and generally I feel like the musculoskeletal lifestyle medicine, things like posture particularly, those aspects are not fully covered adequately in the medical training, and I think the overlap with what my work with Propane has really helped bolster that and create more of a holistic approach to the athlete or to the patient. So this presentation is for the lifter, the weightlifter, the bodybuilder, anyone who does any form of resistance training or strength training, and who also happens to be a desk worker or spends lots of time sitting hunched over a desk and giving themselves a bad posture in the process, and also for the healthcare professional or personal trainer that either wants to start by helping themselves heal thyself and then work with clients or patients to help them also to develop a better posture and to understand some of the principles and mechanisms of control and how we can improve that for this population. So let's get straight into it then. So first of all, this presentation is going to cover the what, the how, and the why of posture, or the what, the why, and the how. So to begin, posture in the dictionary is defined as approach or attitude, and I think this is really apt when we are looking at the way that somebody sits, stands, or holds themselves. So Ushiba says that a good stance and posture reflect a proper state of mind, and really somebody's posture is the tip of the iceberg. It's the reflection of everything else that is going on with them, psychosocially and biologically, so and physiologically as well. So it's actually fascinating in that this is a two-way relationship, and by improving one, we will improve the other. And we're going to get into some of the processes that are going on in that. So it's also defined as the resting position of a joint. So for example, from the side, the resting position of a shoulder, where the humerus sits relative to the rest of the body, or the midline. Now, we're often hearing about neutral spine and straightening out your posture. Now, this isn't necessarily always true. Sometimes you might not want to always straighten out the spine. As you know, the spine has three natural curves, which are the cervical, the thoracic, and the lumbar, and also the sacral, which are in kyphosis, lordosis, and cervical lordosis, thoracic kyphosis, lumbar lordosis, and sacral kyphosis. Now, these are natural curves, and they actually maintain the structural stability and integrity of the spine. So if we have too much or too little, then yes, we want to be correcting that, but it's not a one-size-fits-all solution for everybody. So, to start with, anyone know what these are? These are guy wires. So if you've ever set up a tent, you'll know that you have a vertical structure and then some wires that apply equal tension to either side. And even if there's not a huge amount of tension coming through there, they will massively improve the ability of that stable structure to withstand compressive force. And this is exactly what's going on with our spines. So we have the structure in the middle, our spines, and then these guy wires are the muscles on either side. So front to back, the abs and the lumbar erectors, and also side to side, the transversus abdominis and the obliques, and the QL and iliopsoas and all of that stuff as well. Now, what can happen often with posture is if we have an excessive force or excessive weakness on one side, like this poor lady, then you can end up with a reduction in the stability of the spine and eventually wearing out the spine. Stuart McGill talks about the spine having a certain number of potential life cycles of flexion, for example. And if you waste that capacity too early, you're going to degenerate the spine and predispose yourself to injury. So we'll talk about what we can do about that. Stuart McGill actually also mentions that strength training, and if you're in this population, this is bad news, can functionally repurpose the muscles in your spine, so these guy wires, from oxidative endurance style muscle fibers into glycolytic fast twitch ones. Now that's a great adaptation to lift more weight, to deadlift more, power clean more, but it's not great to maintain the endurance capacity of your spine and the long-term stability. Now, unfortunately, strength does not correlate with protection from back pain. It's actually the spinal endurance, which is the biggest predictor of whether someone suffers from back pain or back injury. And flexibility can actually have a negative effect on back pain in terms of correlation. So unfortunately, strength training alone is not going to protect you from back pain, and it's one of the big, horrible ironies of life that the couch potato has more back pain than... Sorry, the couch potato has less back pain than the average weightlifter. And so this is something that we need to consider when we're developing our plan for yourself or for your clients. Now, to start with as well, we need to look at what is posture and what controls it. And this is one of these topics where I started to dive into it and I thought, this will be fine. It'll be one or two things. I'll be able to bash it out in a quick article or half an hour. Whereas actually it's a bit of a labyrinth. It's a minefield. But posture is controlled by vestibular control, so the labyrinth in your ear, in your inner ear. So you've got the tightrope walker. Emotional control. I mean, if you're going to sit and slump over, you immediately feel that, and vice versa. If you're in a low emotional state, just check in with your posture and look how you're standing. Everyone knows this, and you can even tell from looking at somebody what kind of emotional state they're in. Visual control, so depending on your surroundings and the way that you are oriented with the world visually will affect how you hold yourself. Cortical and somatic control, and mechanical as well, which is partly to do with the length-tension relationships in the muscles, such as these guy wires. So there's a lot going on, and it's important that we can't just take a single approach to correcting your posture, otherwise it's not going to embed itself as a new habit. So that is the what of posture. Now, why would you want to make any changes? Well, the first one, and I think this can never be overstated enough, because everybody wants to look better naked or just simply look better. And the aesthetic part of having good posture is massive. Nobody wants to be walking around looking like an ape. Now, at Propanefitness as well, we also talk about not becoming that guy. The one who's always eating out of Tupperware, constantly has his protein shake bottle, and just shouts out to the world like, I am a guy who trains and I'm really spending hours in the gym and I've got no life. And we want to give off the impression of the swan that is gliding across the top of the water, and it appears effortless from the top, whereas underneath there is a very coordinated and controlled effort going on. And that's the better position to be in, so that you don't end up looking like a melt or a sad case. So what's the biggest way to slap the meathead stamp on your forehead? It's to stand with invisible lat syndrome, which is where somebody is stuck in fixed internal rotation. Their arms are out to the side. This is partly, again, the emotional control, feeling like they want to project that image of being the guy who lifts. But also it's partly just due to tightness and doing too much bench press, not enough pulling movements, for example. Now, the flip side of that is that if you truly develop correct and an open, relaxed posture, it's going to make you look naturally more wide and also more effortless, because your shoulders will suddenly sit in the middle of your midline. It'll elongate your neck, you'll look taller, you'll look wider, and if you're a guy, you're going to look more masculine and show off the work that you've put in the gym. And if you're a woman, you're going to look taller, more graceful, and have that correct posture rather than either a slouch posture or the kind of over-exaggerated lordosis of sticking your bum out that some people do. And it's not always a conscious thing. Sometimes it's just from wearing high heels too much and, again, having these abnormal tension relationships in their guy wires. Pain. So the data on posture and pain is actually relatively inconclusive for back pain. It's conclusive for feet, hips, and shoulders. Now, I find this really interesting because we always associate poor posture with back pain. And it may be that it's coming out that actually poor posture is maybe more of an effect of back pain than a cause. And the reason for that is perhaps that when we're in pain, we hold our joint in a protective way to try and avoid further pain. And with the back, it's particularly sensitive to, or that there are adaptations where you increase the number of mechanoreceptors in the spine, alpha and gamma receptors, to be more sensitive to pain and eventually hypersensitize themselves so that even normal movement can be perceived as pain. And so as a result, the individual will start to hold their spine in a way that avoids any pain, and they develop more and more tension. And so actually, when they're being assessed at a pinpoint in time, we see them and think, oh, well, you've got bad posture. That's clearly the cause of your back pain. Whereas in fact, it may just be that that is the end result. But the thing that we do find that has kind of come out to be more reliable is that change in posture is more important than any particular static posture for back pain specifically. And you've heard the quote, the ideal posture is a variable one. Now for feet, hips and shoulders, it's a bit more of a clear relationship that abnormal foot, hip or shoulder posture will correlate with pain and often can be the cause of it. And if you correct the posture, you can often correct the pain as well. With back pain, this may be possible, but it's not a guarantee. And there are other things that we can do for back pain which involve more kind of chronic pain management stuff beyond the scope of today. Now, loaded postures. This is a lot more simple. So we were talking about standing and resting postures before. When you're under load, the simple guidelines are pretty much all you need. And they're kind of obvious. They're pretty intuitive, which are that if you're under load, you've got a bar on your back, you're deadlifting, you want lumbar neutral, which is your lower back not to be in excessive lordosis or excessive kyphosis. We don't want to have any flexion under load, so no movement. That is, if you set up for a deadlift, you do not want to be halfway through the lift and then for your spine to buckle. That is where you put yourself at the greatest risk of a disc herniation. We also want to avoid any end range positions in the spine. So if you're achieving lumbar neutral, then you're going to be well away from that. But we don't want to be pulling a deadlift in full flexion or in a squat in full extension. So we're really trying to arch our back, and you can end up also causing yourself problems there. Now, the argument about what about rounding the upper back when you're deadlifting is one that, as far as I'm concerned, if I'm talking to anybody who is not an elite level powerlifter, the answer is do not round your upper back when you're deadlifting. If you're an elite level lifter and rounding your back is going to give you the 0.5% of additional load, because mechanically it is more advantageous, that it will allow you to hit a PB and win a competition, then really that risk is up to you. That is a judgment call for you to make as to whether it's worth it or not. But to train it as a deliberate technique comes with its risks, and it requires an incredible amount of control to be able to isolate your thoracic spine from your lumbar spine. So something to bear in mind with rounding your upper back with the deadlift. Some people will tell you that it's fine and it doesn't put you under any risk, but really, is it a risk that you want to take, and is it going to pay off, or is it just going to be a gym PB? If that's the case, then spare the ego, continue to lift with better form, and eventually you will hit that weight anyway with a better posture and more longevity in your lifting. So, a few other factors in posture. You may have seen the TED Talk and the study that came out about hormones and power poses. This was one that said that if you stand in a power pose, and they took people before a job interview style presentation, made them stand like hands on hips or 1 foot up on a desk, and stand like that for 2 minutes. And they said that the testosterone cortisol ratio improved favorably for those that were in power postures, and reduced when they were sat in a kind of submissive posture. However, these studies were replicated, and they generally found that there wasn't much change on the hormonal level, and that perhaps the first study was doing some kind of statistical trickery to make it significant. So hormones, not really much of a factor. However, we're not really trying to improve our hormonal profile, we're trying to improve the effect of that, which is the mood. Now, luckily, posture does have a defined effect on mood. So adopting an upright seated posture in the face of stress can maintain self-esteem, reduce negative mood, and increase positive mood compared to a slumped posture. This is what Nair and Sagar found in their study. sitting upright, so therefore maybe a simple behavioral strategy to reduce stress. Now, based on their participants, what they found is that they were more readily willing to think and accept positive thoughts about themselves when they were sat in an upright, confident posture. And they were more willing to accept those kind of empowering thoughts and memories. Whereas when they were collapsed and feeling helpless, they just didn't trust themselves at all. The positive or the negative thoughts, they just had very little faith in themselves based on the studies and the questionnaires that they did afterwards. Now, this is fascinating because it's a two-way thing, and you can have the emotional stimulus having an effect on your posture, and also the posture having an effect on your emotional stimulus and the way that you actually think and perceive the world. So this is huge, and if you're missing out on this, that's a huge slice of your experience of life that we're also throwing away there. Breathing, finally. So, as you can expect, a poor posture, a slumped over posture, will physically restrict the lungs. This has been confirmed in the research, but it's also kind of obvious that if you slump over right now, you're not going to be able to take as deep a breath as you would normally. Finally, performance. So, strength and endurance have also been shown to be improved when adopting correct dynamic postures, which come about, they arise from having a good resting standing posture. Okay, so that is the what and the why of posture. Hopefully you're convinced by now that there's a huge number of potential benefits there. So the aesthetic, the pain management, mood, breathing, and performance. Now, how do we go about doing this? The first thing, and really the key thing to address, is your flexibility, stretching. So if you turn your head all the way to the right side, you'll reach a point where your brain is like, that is my limit. I can't go any further safely or I'm going to hurt myself. Now, if you were to hold that stretch and gently stretch it for another minute or two, you might gain a few more degrees. Suddenly, that new point that you've just achieved feels like the old point. It's like, hey, no, this is my limit now. And so what your brain has done is it's instantly remapped a new zone that it feels safe in. And that's the somatosensory cortex. And so what that does is that if you were to stretch and gradually access that new range of motion, your brain will remap it to now be the new safe range. And this is a great little quirk that we can start playing with and use to expand our posture and re-inhabit the zone that we previously didn't feel safe standing in. And this can be both psychological and very physical as well, that sometimes we withdraw from the world, we hold back because we don't feel safe to just fully express ourselves. And so it's very much tied in with the emotional body as well, and I don't think we can really extricate the two. Strengthening. So this is often the primary recommendation that people give. They say, oh, if you're slouched over, then that's just because your upper back is weak. Maybe the case, but you try holding your shoulders back against your tight chest. If you can maybe do it for 30 seconds, and if you strengthen your upper back, what are you going to be able to do? Hold it for 40 seconds, maybe 50 seconds. You're not going to be able to hold it for 24 hours. So, and this is confirmed in the research. Correlational studies have failed to detect a significant association between muscle strength alone and scapular position. However, they did find a significant relationship between muscle length and scapular position. So this shows that the flexibility of the antagonistic muscles that are pulling our shoulders out of shape, for example, that is the key factor. And it kind of makes sense that if you're driving with the brakes on, first thing you should do is take the brakes off before you start applying more acceleration. Then if you combine the two, stretching and strengthening, then you've got the perfect formula. You can then really start to open out your posture and maintain that new position, that new level. So, yeah, the data's been pretty hard to pin down on this, but generally it's not very reliable to say that strengthening exercises alone will fix that. The other factor as well that probably explains some of this discrepancies in the data is that you can strengthen and stretch all you want, but until you consciously cultivate that new opened up range of motion, that newly accessed area of your space that you can take up, then it's not going to stick. And so the individual has to be on board with developing that new posture as well as just doing the stretches. And that can be as simple as just giving them a frequent reminder to continue to access and enter that new range. And also they just to be clear on what cue they should be using to do that. So how do we put that together? For the tight muscles, so for example, I'm using the slouching as an example, the upper body kyphosis and scapular protraction, we want to stretch out the obviously tight muscles, which in which case would be the pec minor, pec major, the anterior deltoids, and the biceps. We want to work on some joint mobilizations, some overhead mobilizations, that kind of thing, so that we have both the muscle and the joint being mobile enough to hold their new position without feeling under threat. We can do some soft tissue work if there's any kind of trigger points that are going on in that area. Often there are, particularly under the clavicles, some pretty nasty ones if you can just play around with that right now. And do some dynamic stretching as well. For the antagonistic muscles, we can do lots of activation, strengthening, and developing that motor control to access the new range. Once you have that new pattern underway, that's when we can develop the conscious control and the action reminders that I'll talk about in a second. Visualization is really helpful as well, and having some kind of proprioceptive feedback. So you could pay someone to hit you with a stick every time that you slouch, or if you don't want to pay someone to hit you with a stick, maybe put some sellotape on your back in a cross shape, which will achieve the same thing. So how are we doing so far, guys? Hopefully that makes sense. We've got the what, the why, and we're beginning the how. So the steps involved with identifying any postural problem, and this goes for any joint or your whole body, is first of all identify what is the pattern that you aim to fix. Let's say, oh, I've got an excessive arch in my lower back, or the opposite perhaps, or I'm slouching over in my upper body and my shoulders are internally rotated, which again is the most common one, and it's going to be very common if you are an office worker or you spend time sitting at a desk. Or even just someone that uses your phone a lot and you end up with text neck. Now, the key is to determine the muscles that are tight and determine the antagonists, and then find out what is the new desired pattern that I'm trying to achieve, what is a cue that will help me to achieve that, and also what is an action reminder that will constantly remind me of that cue and turn it into something that becomes second nature. And it absolutely is possible, even if it feels like you're doing a massive uphill struggle to begin with. Next thing is to get to work. So develop a daily routine of stretching the tight muscles, strengthening the antagonists, and then consciously accessing and inhabiting the new range. And this is you stepping into your new home, which is your new open, relaxed, lengthened posture. Right, so I'm going to give you a worked example of this with a few things that you can try. So again, we're going to stick with this example of the hunchback posture. So the first thing is we want to identify what is the problem and what can we address. And the quickest way to do that is either a professional advice, have someone look over you and stand in your pants and say, look, what's wrong with me? Ask a trained professional and they will give you a full breakdown, or you can identify it yourself, photos from the front and from the side. Look at certain points of reference as well, so the acromion, for example, on both sides, see if they're level. From the side, look at the neck, the thorax, the lumbar spine, the hips and the knees, and you can identify any deficiencies there. Next, we want to stretch out the tight muscles. So this is a shotgun approach. You need to try these all out and figure out which one is the tightest for you, and then whittle things down to 3 key stretches that you're going to do every day. I'd rather you do 3 key ones than 20 and only stick to it for 2 or 3 days, because the key thing here is consistency and getting the most bang for your buck. So find the minimum effective dose for the biggest bang for buck, the highest yield things that you can work on, and then once you've done that for a while, then you can maybe add in some more stuff. So the biceps and the anterior delts are going to be tight if you have a hunched over posture. This is a position called the tabletop, and despite my calm face in this photo, it is a hugely uncomfortable position to be in. Give it a try. It looks pretty natural, and then when you try it yourself, you're like, oh my god, I am feeling tight from the sternum outwards right down to the wrists. So holding the tabletop, I'll give you some prescriptions for time and specific how long to hold each stretch for in a moment as well. The pec minor, so you can do this on a wall or in a squat rack, where you have the elbow elevated slightly above the shoulder, and then the wrist back, step forward into that with the same leg as the arm that's come through, and just breathe and open into that, making sure that you're leading with the chest and moving the other shoulder back, so you're lengthening that those 2 points from the coracoid process all the way down to the ribs, and widening that as much as possible during the stretch. For pec major, you can do the floor stretch here. This is lovely because the whole side is fully supported by the floor throughout this. And also you can do this if you have a partner that doesn't like you very much, then you can hold on to a broomstick and play this masochistic stretch where one foot, or sadistic I suppose, one foot in your lower back, the other foot in your upper back, and to gently pull back and breathe into that stretch. And it actually, I joke about it, but it is a wonderful stretch. It feels incredible, and it's a great way, because it's quite passive, and then you can, but you're still in control if you need to, is a great way to really open up, and you'll get the full chain. So give that one a try. Lats. So these often function as a strong internal rotator of the humerus, and people often think that, oh, if I'm doing lots of pull-ups, then that's going to improve my posture, but actually, because of the plane that we're working in, it's going to act as more of an internal rotation moment. So it's something that we will need to stretch out and make sure that you balance it out with a lot of horizontal pulling as well in your training. But for now, stretch out the lats, try this out. Notice the bow shape in the spine. So you're pushing your bum off to the opposite side of the arm, and you're really trying to bow that upper body out to the side, and you'll feel this lovely stretch, not just through the lats, but right through the side chain. Some other stretches, so the scalenes, these are all parts of the neck, smaller muscles in the neck, looking up to that side as you depress the shoulder, and you're holding on to a bar and a squat rack there. And then the traps, you can do that similarly, but slightly different position there. So with the palm out stretched, push it down, and then tilt the head up and play around with the head position. You will find that there is an angle where your traps are feeling it all the way along the length of them. You can also lie on a foam roller for 5-10 minutes at a time. Maybe don't use a rumble roller like I did. So set it long ways across the spine, and just allow yourself to open up sagittally like that, so that everything widens in that plane as well. For each of these stretches, you want to hold them for 21 breaths, and the stretches where the limb is supported are going to be more effective, because it'll overcome that apprehension reflex and stop you from freaking out, like if you were to just suddenly try and drop into the splits. There's going to be a whole lot of internal resistance to that, as opposed to having cushions under all the limbs and gently being able to go into that stretch and open up into them more. So it's not about having a no pain, no gain approach. It's about gently allowing your body to open up into that new range, remap the somatosensory cortex, and access that new range as well. Next, we want to activate the weak and lazy muscles. So abs and glutes, we've got glute bridges here, and also a partner hip flexor stretch. Again, another sadistic one that you can do. You can pull up the partner's rear leg as well, and then get them to contract and relax against you as well as you deepen that stretch. Bird dogs, another one of the Stuart McGill Big Three. Fantastic movement. Try and maintain tension throughout, through the glutes, clench the fist, make sure there's no sinking in the lower back, and do those for 10 to 15 second holds on each side. And face pulls. You can do face pulls as much as you want to in your training program. So lead with the thumb up to the sides of the ears, do them with a cable that's either right ahead of you or slightly above. You can do those for sets of 12 to 15. Also the joint mobilizations, so the wall slides. As you're moving up the wall, try and maintain your wrists and your arms in contact with the wall the whole time without the lower back arching away from the wall. Next we have active hangs. So these can be done where the scapula are depressed as you're hanging from a bar, and then let go and stretch out into a passive hang, and then pull back into the active hang again. So it's not a pull-up, we're not flexing at the elbow, we're just trying to maintain the depression of the scapula, engage the lower traps as well. Speaking of lower traps, We have the dip plus as well, so this is where you get it set up in a dip bar, let the shoulders hunch up, and then press down with the lower traps, keeping the arms straight. Finally, we have band pull-aparts as well. These are great for rear delts and also drilling that open position there. So give those a try, pick a light band, do them for 2 to 3 sets of 30 reps, and you can do those daily as well. So that would be an example stretching and strengthening program. Now for conscious repatterning, this is about accessing the new range now. We want to have some cues. For example, imagine that you're being pulled up by the crown of your head like a puppet. That'll immediately align everything and lengthen the body. Another cue that's used in the Alexander technique is think of the arms and the hands like heavy rain. And I think that's a beautiful one because it really drills in that sense of dropping down vertically with the arms and the limbs and creating that length and tallness. Sellotape, so the tactile cues that you can use, so you can have a cross of sellotape across the back, for example, or you can even do something like wear a ring. Every time you notice the ring on your hand, that should be another reminder to correct your posture, sit up, access that new range that you've been working on. Something else you can do is set a timer at your desk, and every 10 minutes perform Brugger's maneuver, which is this. So you sat at the desk, you then externally rotate everything, abduct the legs, and lift the chin, and hold that for a few seconds, and then resume. And if you have that every 10 minutes or so, it at least breaks the pattern of stress and being hunched over at your desk. So something else to be aware of is text neck. Ideally, don't send text messages from your phone. If you can get an app that links with your laptop, then you can text by typing properly on a computer. But if you have to, just be aware not to let the head hang lower and lower as you're texting and for that to become a pattern. So that's it, guys. So to wrap things up, we have the why of posture, which is to avoid pain and injury, improve your performance, improve your mood, improve people's perception of you and your own perception of yourself, and your readiness to believe your thoughts, your confidence in your own ability to perceive the world. The 4-step process to improve your posture is to identify the pattern that you want to correct, stretch, activate, and repattern. Activate that new pattern and engage with the conscious cues to solidify and to step into your new home. So a few little tips just before we go to build into your daily routine would be the minimum effective dose. So as I said, pick 3 stretches rather than 20. You're more likely to stick to them. Stack the habits. So perhaps when you brush your teeth in the morning, stack it on with your stretching and activating routine. Maybe while you're waiting for the kettle to boil, any kind of dead time, just hook them onto that. Things that you do already every day, you're much more likely to then stick to it because it's stacked onto something else. Include it as part of your warm-up. Again, it's something that you do normally when you're in the gym, and also build in the action triggers. So consider the timer every 10 minutes or a beep on your phone, or every time you get a text message even, that could be a good way to do it. Wearing the ring, anything like that that is going to constantly just make you mindful once again of what's going on. Okay, so that is it for Posture 101. I hope that was helpful, and I will speak to you all soon.